All right. Okay, good morning. I'm Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and it's Friday, April 17th. I have to check my bar because the days flow together. And it's Charter Moms Chats. It's around 9 a.m. And we have a guest today. We have Kristen Henry. And let me check the bio so I get it right. Okay, so she is an independent education consultant at KH Literacy Education. And she recently did a guest post on the SA Charter Mom site, and the link is in the description. We're going to share it out again today. But she has some really good ideas about, the title is Big Goals, Relevant Work, and Flexibility, How to Make At-Home Learning Work for You. So I'm going to hand it off. Kristen, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you picked this topic for the guest post?
Absolutely. So yes, I'm an independent literacy consultant. I work mostly with English teachers, mostly secondary, but sometimes upper elementary as well. I used to be a high school English teacher, and then I was a curriculum coordinator at a district. So I was a district level administrator. And then I just really discovered that I wanted to spend my time working with teachers. And when you're a district level administrator, that means a lot of times you get pulled into your office or meetings and so I decided to go out and do it on my own, which has been fantastic because I love working with teachers and being in the classroom with them. And that's what's kind of been difficult about this for me this time. The social distancing is I don't get to be in the classroom with teachers, and the teachers I've been working with all year, you're starting to see the growth, and then all of a sudden, you can't be there. And the post I wrote really is kind of tied to similar recommendations that I made for teachers and what I thought they should, how they should plan things for students, because this is just it's a different time, right? There's a lot of stress, anxiety, grief. Teachers don't necessarily know what home looks like for some students, especially if they're older students and maybe they're taking care of younger brothers and sisters, or there's just all sorts of things that you can't predict about what's going on at home. And so I think it's important to kind of take away, not lower expectations at all, but you have to think about what you can reasonably ask and what can reasonably happen at home. And then on the other part, realize that you don't have the constraints of like a school schedule. And that can be really freeing and really exciting when you're like, you know what? You could read all day if you wanted to, and that would be okay. So kind of, having the grace and the compassion that you're not sure what would look like at home, but then also, having that opportunity not to have the constraints of a bell schedule. So, so there's a lot of opportunity. And I think, parents can take advantage of some of those same sort of ideas to work with their students and, be easy on yourself and at the end of the day, do the best that you can. But, don't beat yourself over the head about things.
Right. I think one of the key things about your post I thought was really important for our audience is that you're working with teachers, but for the blog post you shifted and translated this advice for things that parents can do at home with their kids. Right. And then so like your main area of expertise is literacy, right? And so the post has a lot of ideas about ways to like really develop your kids' literacy skills while you have this time at home, which is, like you said, it's difficult, but it's also an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really, whenever I like talk about reading with parents or adults or anybody that's trying to improve the literacy life of their child, it's about giving them that time and opportunity to find that spark and that love of reading. And so I always kind of refer to it as finding your Nancy, because Nancy Drew made me a reader. Like that's what I mean, because I can remember being in the slow reading group in first grade. And if you don't think kids remember that, they do, because I remember that. But I remember loving Nancy Drew and reading her ravenously and always being like, hey, Mom, can you buy me, like, I need a Nancy Drew book, or let's go to the library and get a Nancy Drew book. And for a lot of students, if they haven't found their Nancy, You know, they haven't found that spark. Well, maybe they read out of compliance. There's plenty of kids that read out of compliance, right? But if
Right.
they have never been in bed at night and wanted to stay up late to finish a
With the flashlight. Yeah. Oh,
well, like
yeah.
the other
I have
night,
props.
yes, I stayed up until 3 because I was like, oh my God, I have to finish this, right? But if kids haven't experienced that, I feel like it's all of our adult jobs to help them find that. Like, what book can they find? And I think right now we have this kind of time and flexibility. And I love all the like online access you can get with the San Antonio Public Library. Like that's what I use, like the Overdrive
Yeah.
app or Kindle, to help kids explore different genres, different authors they might like. Maybe it's a graphic novel, but you kind of right now have that with without that schedule, without this long line of activities and events and things, have
Right.
an opportunity
Right.
for students to maybe find, oh, you know what, I really like sci-fi or I really like historical fiction, and that can really make your student a reader. It's just helping them find that spark. So I think there's an opportunity to do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So my kids have generally, I mean, a pretty serious homework load. I mean, they go to a school that's rigorous, and
Mhm.
I felt like we didn't have time. So what we're trying to do with the time is we have sort of a family book club. So we
Oh,
chose a
right.
sci-fi book that's different than it's not a book that they would be reading at school. So we chose a science fiction book that my daughter's 12, my daughter's 10, my son's 12. It's a book I read 10 years ago, and my husband's read it. And so the kids and I are each we read a short piece, takes maybe 15, 20 minutes to read it. And then we sit and discuss it for another 15, 20 minutes. And we've been doing that about 2 or 3 times a week. And it's because it's science fiction, it's like sparking my son's excitement in ways that maybe the classic literature hasn't always done for him. Like he really likes adventure, he likes historical fiction, he likes science fiction. And so I think like my daughter, she found Harry Potter. That was her Nancy Drew. She
Oh
found Harry
yeah.
Potter. Yeah. I'm sure there are a lot of Potter fans in this on
Oh,
this
I'm a
stream right
Potter.
now. So, yeah,
I love reading them over and
yeah,
over again.
yeah. And her fourth grade teacher is her homeroom teacher is a Potter fan too. So I mean, J.K. Rowling is a saint. Like she has made so many kids readers just
Yes.
across the board. Yeah.
I was exposed to the first one when I took a children's literature class, actually way back in undergrad. But in the first one, what I like about the Harry Potter books is they kind of grow up with kids, because the first few are
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
go back and reread them as an adult, you're like, that's kind of kiddie. But then by the time you get to the last ones, they're much darker. They're much more adult. And so I think that's what's
Right.
really nice
Right.
about the series is kids can grow up with it, and kind of mature with the same characters, which is really nice. So
I think great books have things that younger kids can appreciate, and then things as adults. Like I love the Chronicles of Narnia, the books because by C.S. Lewis, because I read those as a kid and then I reread them as an adult. And like if you are trying to kind of rethink your purpose in life or find your calling, those are great companion books for that journey. Like as kids, they're just a great adventure story with the magic and the time shifts and characters who have feelings, who overcome them, and but as adults, like I mean, those are very enlightening books. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Well, it's really interesting. And by the way, if you like J.K. Rowling but you want to read her more adult like mystery books, her
Oh,
Former
ooh,
and
I haven't read
Strike
those yet.
series. Well, it's under Robert Gilbreth, I think her
Right, right,
or her pin name for those. But those are great. And if you ever read like the Lightning Thief series, like the Percy Jackson series
right.
for kids, he also has a detective story.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Rick Riordan, I think Big Red Tequila was his first.
yes, yes.
Yeah, the Trace Navarre. Yeah, those
Oh,
are,
yeah.
those are really good.
So
Yeah,
those are the two. Not for with your kids.
yeah,
But you can still enjoy
yeah,
the authors, and have just a different type of author study.
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I want to come back to the guest post that you wrote, and like because there's
Mhm.
really good advice about. So I think one of the things you stressed was finding relevance is a way to help kids connect with literacy and also to help them make sense of these strange times that we're living through. Right? It helps them open up and talk
Yeah,
about. So I don't know. Can you give like sort of tips or examples of like how families can implement that at home?
absolutely. I mean, and this happens in the club. I mean, it happens all the time. Is you have to make things real for kids and kind of meet them where
Yeah.
they are. And I think right now, if you try to force, oh, I really want you to work on this, but their whole thought is like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at these graphs on coronavirus or whatever.
Right.
You know, there's so much things that you see, social media, on the news, just around. It's all about kind of meeting with them where they are and going with where their interest already is. Because relevance adds to motivation, right? Oh, well, I'm really
Yeah.
curious about that. I wonder what happened there. You know, maybe, you know, they saw the picture of all of the cars at the food bank and they're like, well, what does that even mean? Like, especially if you've never had
Right.
a food bank, like what does a food bank do? And you could do like like self-directed research like that, where maybe they go find like how many people are served by a food bank in the United States, or how you could volunteer or donate, things that
Mm.
are, you know, based on what they saw, and they're wondering, like they have this natural question, like kids have natural curiosity.
Right.
It's about like, how do you tune into that natural curiosity? And they go, oh, you know, it's as easy as going, how about we find that out? How about we go online and find some resources and see what the answer to that question is? Or, you know, things that are just happening that are real to them, and they have that natural question. That natural spark of curiosity is there, and I would say ride that spark of curiosity, right? And then they
Yeah.
might find the answer, and that might not be what they want to talk about tomorrow, but they had a research project, they presented
Yeah.
you the outcome of that. I mean, and you didn't have
That's
to.
real learning.
Yeah, it is real learning. It's what we as adults do all the time,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter's particularly interested in cooking because since we're not eating out, and she wants more variety. So I got her a cookbook, and that was the thing I couldn't, like, she didn't want to go to bed because she wanted to keep paging through her new cookbook and figure out what recipes to get, right? And there's
Well,
math in that too, right?
there's math, there's procedural text. I mean,
Hmm.
there's you could make actually cooking. You could probably do a fantastic, like completely cross curricular, like math, science,
Like
uh,
geography, where does this spice come from, right?
reading,
Yeah.
writing, social studies, like the cultural aspects of food. That's a great idea.
Okay, future blog post, right?
I mean, everybody eats, everybody cooks. You know, how can you integrate that into a great lesson that is actually also very practical? Which is
Yeah, yeah. Because a lot of what we spend time doing these days is like,
yeah.
cooking, washing dishes, figuring out where to get groceries. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
think about what's going on in my kitchen right now. I'm like, oh.
That's why we control where the camera goes. We
Yes,
pick the backdrop.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
all we need to see.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so when you talk about relevance, how would some of those things translate for younger children? Because I know, like, your main expertise is with middle school, high school kids, but in the post you talk about, like, ways that you can still that these relevance questions are still applicable to younger kids. It just might take a little different strategy. Like,
Yeah,
don't give them the sharp knives in the kitchen.
right. They might not be good. They could watch you though. I mean, you could talk about the
Yeah.
things they like to eat and why they like to eat them. You can always have conversations about maybe why you don't have a certain food on the table. I mean, I think, you know, strategically picking books that they want to read. Like, what do they want to listen to today? Or what type of story, you know, kids will ask, oh, tell me a story. You know, what type of story can you kind of engage them in a conversation? And then, you know, with little kids that don't necessarily write, like they're emergent writers, you could still have
Mhm.
them write about their experience and in pictures. And then,
Right.
of course, they have kind of their invented writing. But, you know, what does your life look like today? Like, what do you like about being home? And like
Oh
I
yeah,
said,
you mentioned journaling in the
yes,
blog post
yeah.
as like a really important tool, like as a builds literacy skills, but also as like a kind of a mental health tool, right? Social emotional learning.
You know, I sat down, you know, I knew I had this time, you know, because when schools closed, my life kind of changed. And I was like, I'm going to write my second book, right? I'm going to have my assignment in my head and I'm going to write. But that's not what I've been writing. Like a lot of what I've written might turn into something later, but it's been much more um it hasn't been practical writing. It's been more emotional writing and getting things down on paper. Because a lot of times kids aren't, you know, gonna say, oh, I'm sad or I'm disappointed, but it might come out,
right.
it might come out in their writing, it might come out if they're a little kid in their pictures and the colors they choose. I was listening to I love, if you haven't listened to the new Brene Brown podcasts that
Oh,
she
no.
started, because it talks a lot about like comparative grief and the things that put you through the last one, and I might actually do a blog post about the last one, is about social emotional learning and
Mm,
knowing how to label your emotions, and that people in general, especially in the United States, are not very good at like understanding the difference between anger and disappointment, right? So
right. And this goes across ages. This isn't
right,
just that
right. So
children don't know how,
people,
like adults are still figuring this out.
yeah, but maybe they're just disappointed, right? There's a lot of disappointment, there's a lot of grief, and sometimes working through a
Yeah.
journal entry.
Yeah.
And if you read their journal entries, you can go, she's not mad at me. She's just really disappointed she didn't get to do this. And so that
Yeah.
can kind of help,
Yeah.
I think, also give parents insight into, their child's social emotional health too. But it also just is an outlet, right?
Yeah.
I feel better even if I'm going to not do anything with what I wrote. Sometimes I feel better just to have it on paper. And
Yeah.
that's the same with
Yeah.
kids, that's the same with kids too. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess I want to. So one last question that ties back in with the blog post, and then so you talked about flexibility and creativity, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning of our talk today that um, like like in some ways, like we've had this. Our structures have all been blown up, right? We don't have a bell schedule. We don't have the
okay.
places that we go. Everything's closed, right? But we can find opportunity in having no like creating our own schedule, or just read a book the whole day, right?
Yeah.
And then so and some of that is like, yeah, we have to set aside our disappointment and say, okay, well, with this blank canvas, what are we going to do with it? So that's why flexibility and creativity are so important. So if you can kind of take us away on that note.
Yeah. I just, and I even actually last night when I was thinking about our talk this morning, I was thinking about, man, when I was a teacher, I hated bills. Like I hated them. And like when we had like testing, but my kids still had class with someone else's testing, we would get rid of the bells. And I was like, why can't? And everything was fine. Like everybody got to class, right? I'm like, can we
Right.
not have them? Like I'm an adult. I know when to like get my kids into class. I know when to get them out. And
Right.
so there's, I think the system that we think, you know, the system that we think has always been there has really not always been there. And so,
Right.
one, I think this is an opportunity to rethink education and what it looks like in general.
Yeah.
But I think it's an opportunity for us to get out of our minds that you read for 20 minutes because that's our reading day and we're going to read for 20. Well, no, you read for as long as you want to,
Yeah.
or I have art class for 45. Well, if you're painting, like in the real world, if an artist wants to paint all day, they're going to paint all day. It's not going to be these false confinements, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
maybe I want to do something for 15 minutes and then I want to switch gears. There's nothing to
Yeah.
say you have to work on this for 45 minutes, right? So you don't have the constraints of a bell, you don't have the constraints of it going from class to class. You can just actually do things that are more authentic and actually, when you're a teacher, you're like, well, I have to fill another 10 minutes, even though this is a perfect 30-minute lesson. But that doesn't happen at home. You can just do, it took 30 minutes, it took 30 minutes. It's going to take 2 hours, it's going to take 2 hours. And I think that is incredible flexibility. It allows kids,
Yeah.
your kids to see, hey, this is what it's like in the real world. If it takes me 2 hours to write this, it takes me 2 hours, right? I
Right.
don't need to be in this false world if I have to do it in 45 minutes. So,
Right.
because there's a lot of things that don't happen in school because, it's going to take a little too long or it's not exactly aligned to this. So I think there's a lot of freedom for students to kind of, give them some independence, have them kind of drive the bus and come up with some things without having to worry about, does it fit in a certain amount of parameters?
Right. Right. That's what I hope my kids are learning, like things that like independence and kind of self management in ways that because of the structure of school, they're not really exercising those skills at school. And I hope it's things that carry them, forward in life of like, goal setting and figuring out the steps to get there, and asking themselves what they're passionate about, and then connecting that up with the activities that they want to do day to day.
Because I think there's a lot of teachers that would love to spend more time in what, like in education, you would call genius hour, where students get to have the opportunity to investigate a question that they're really interested in. And it's hard, like trying to fit, oh, when are they going to do this? But I think this is
Yeah,
the opportunity to have kids, like if there's something they're really passionate about, like what can you research? If you have older kids, that might be career, that might be college, that might be like, where do they want to live? I mean, there's all sorts of things. For younger kids, it might be just like, I want to know how this works. Or I want to know more about
right.
my favorite animal. I want to know more about,
Yeah,
and that's just not something they have. Very often they don't have an opportunity to kind of go down the rabbit hole. Like as adults, we get
yeah.
online and we're like, oh my gosh, what about this and this? And we're clicking away and we look up and it's been 3 hours, and that's okay. Kids, we're just like, no, you gotta move on. No, like let them go down the rabbit
Right,
hole, in an appropriate way. Like sometimes the
right,
rabbit hole
right,
might
right.
not be a kid's but
With supervision, yeah.
let them go down the rabbit hole and they might find something like, oh my God, this is really interesting, or this is something um, that I'd like to learn more about. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's I think what I appreciated so much about when I first read your draft was that it had, um, like, you have a realistic appraisal of the situation, right? That this is, this challenge is being put on parents, right? And
mhm,
the teachers from distance are doing the best they can to support it.
yeah,
But even in facing this challenge, we can find the opportunities in it. And you're drawing on your experience as an instructional coach and having worked with so many teachers
yeah,
to open the door and shine a light on the potential silver lining of that
yeah,
we're so hopefully some kids can come through this with a deeper understanding of literacy, and like loving that, maybe they find that author that gets them really fired up, or they improve their reading and writing skills because they found topics that they were interested in and they were able to do that deep dive and not have to fit it in within 45 minutes and not have to, say, align it with
yeah,
a curriculum structure that didn't have seem to have room for what they were passionate about.
right. And I think right now we have that opportunity. I think teachers kind of realize that too. And when I've worked with teachers, I'm like, hey, this is your time to experiment and do something different. And that's the same thing I would tell parents. This is the time to do something different. Like
Yeah,
nobody is everyone was thrown into this. So there's not a whole, like
yeah.
no one's gonna come back and be like, hey, why did you not do that? So it's
Well,
kind
under 4.2, you were
of
supposed to
right.
cover this aspect of fractions, is what,
Exactly. That's why I told teachers,
yeah,
make broad ideas. Like, you can't get into a standard.
yeah,
Like for that, you just don't know what's gonna. Like, I was training teachers all day the past 2 days, right? Because I was supposed to go to Chicago, but we did it online. And I mean, the teachers had their kids with them. Like, I had one yesterday that we were doing book talks, right? We're learning how to do book talks, and she had her 9-month-old with her. I mean,
oh,
yeah, and there were plenty. They're like, you could see their kids coming in and out, and they're trying to be on a training.
were
And
there, were there any like dog cameos, like little ears
yeah,
popping up?
and what I really liked is that the teacher said, "Oh my gosh, I feel like my students feel in this kind of
Yeah,
interface, and it's different, and I don't know what to do, and it feels different." And so I think everybody kind of understands that. I think there's a great amount of grace and understanding, and at the end of the day, it's like if you can keep your kid thinking and keep the brain
yeah,
working, like I'm trying to do that for myself. I bought a whole giant thing of crossword puzzles so my brain would still have to function. And
right, right.
my laptop is on a giant jigsaw puzzle right now that I'm working on. So, I
Nice.
am thinking about how do I keep my brain, going? Because if you just sit and watch Netflix, I was like, my brain is going to turn to mush. Like this
You know,
can't happen.
it's fun for a while, but then it's like, okay, we need to get back to life, like, and have things that we hope for, right? And things that are
Yeah,
true to our values, what we want the world to become. Yeah,
exactly. I felt so
yeah,
much better after training for the past 2 days. I mean, online training all day is not
yeah,
easy, but it's what I do and it's what I like to do. So it made me feel so much better. And I
yeah,
think it's also true with students. Like at a certain time, they might
yeah,
be free time, but at a certain time, there even is something that clicks on in their heads that goes, I need a purpose or something to do. I need,
They need a mountain to climb and something you feel
Yeah,
proud of. Right?
they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but there's an opportunity to kind of guide them so that they can choose that mountain and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're running short on time. Are there any like final thoughts or like things like you want to suggest that like, like if you want to try one thing today, try this with your
Oh,
kids. Like,
geez. I would just say have fun.
yeah.
Have fun with your kids. And if there's something you're super interested in and you can spark that and you can do something together, like I love the idea of the family book club, book circles. And, maybe even if everyone's reading a different book, maybe everybody, like does a book talk, which is
Yeah.
in school where you just say, hey, this is the book I'm reading. This is what it's about. You would like this book if, and then you read a part.
Yeah.
So especially if you have multiple kids, maybe like, hey, maybe I don't like this book, but you might like this book. So after I read it, I might recommend it to you. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of different opportunities, I think, to share and kind of figure out. You actually have time to talk and figure out each other's interests, and maybe it becomes a family project. That's great too. Or if you have older children, maybe they can start helping the younger children with something, and that'll give them some sort of purpose and mountain to climb that they maybe didn't feel
Yeah.
like they had. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are great ideas. I want everybody to please read the blog post, please share it, like send it to your friends. And it's been a real pleasure like working with
thank
you on this guest
you.
post and having you as a guest on Charter Moms Chats. And I hope we can work together on another post. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, it's been great. Thank you so much. And this was so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Okay.
talk
So
about literacy learning all day. So
yeah. Okay. And listeners, please, if you're not already a member, please join the San Antonio Charter Moms discussion group because we've got lots of resources I'll probably start a thread about the book talk idea and like I kind of ask people what they're reading and
yeah,
what they're doing to support literacy. So we'll get that discussion going in the group today. So and I'll be back online at 9 a.m. on Monday. We're lining up some guests for next week. So all right. Thank you, Kristen.
perfect. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.